Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We turn now to poem 396. There is a languor of the life. Languor gets used one and only one time in all of Emily's poetry, and it's here. Some have qualified this word as almost stupefaction. In other words, a certain kind of strange feeling that has to do with whatever it is that she's speaking of, especially the pain that has come and then maybe even gone. Now, there is a lot of debate about this theodicy poem. We've used that term before. Our assumptions is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. And if you have listened to our set of introductory comments, you know that we talked about in 303 our Big Five. What does this text say about epistemology, what you can know, ontology, who you are, psychology, the study of the individual mind, sociology, the study of the collective mind, but finally, the question of theodicy. What are you going to do with pain and suffering? And in this poem, there's a number of different ways to interpret what's going on. There is one scholar, Ruth Miller, who has linked this poem with a letter that Emily wrote, actually the second letter, letter number 261, to Thomas Higginson. She had sent some poems to Higginson and asked that he respond. This was written in April of 1862, this letter, and it begins, quote, "Your kindness," again this is Emily, quote, "your kindness claimed earlier gratitude, but I was ill and write today from my pillow. Thank you for the surgery. It was not so painful as I supposed." Now, for Miller, she believes the surgery that was inflicted by Higginson was specifically his critical response to some poems that have been sent. Now, again, our assumptions are that you've been reading all the previous poems, and we just finished with 395, Reverse Cannot Be Fall. And if you have, then you can place this poem here in a universe of other poems where Emily's been struggling with what if I'm not accepted? What if my stuff is not approved of? And in that regards, the question of theodicy in this poem is, what do you do with the fact that after the pain, after the suffering, there's a certain kind of strange feeling that arrives? In some ways, we're back to poems 365 and 371 already. There is a languor of the life more imminent than pain. 'Tis pain's successor, when the soul has suffered all it can. A drowsiness diffuses, a deadness like a fog envelopes consciousness as mists obliterate a crag. The surgeon does not blanch at pain, his habit is severe, but tell him that it ceased to feel the creature lying there, and he will tell you, skill is late, a mightier than he has ministered before him, there's no vitality. Now, again, if you follow Miller's reading of this poem, which I think makes some sense, what Emily is arguing is that I sent my stuff to you, and you came back with some pretty harsh critical views, and that left me in a certain strange frame of mind. At the end of the poem, Miller argues that probably Sam Boyles is being referenced as being the one that Higginson knew Emily was also sending her work to. So begin by saying, again, Languor only used this one time, a languor of the life more imminent than pain. Imminent we'll see when we get to poems 694, 911, and 1103. More imminent than pain, 'tis pain's successor. And we've seen this already in several of her poems, this idea that you have a negative experience, and then there's the experience that kind of follows afterwards, when the soul has suffered all it can. Again, back to the theodicy question. What is this feeling? Now, one scholar who has argued that Emily struggled with epilepsy believes that's really what's going on here, and you can read Gordon's views on it on your own, guys. A drowsiness is what happens next. From languor to drowsiness, diffuses a dimness, and then she'll use two different similes here. The first is like a fog, which will envelop the consciousness. You'll remember this when we were messing around with 384, Captivity is Consciousness. You'll remember in that lecture we jumped ahead to poem 822, and I'll let you guys run that to ground. 21 different poems. Emily uses consciousness, envelopes consciousness, and then again a simile as mists obliterate a crag. This word obliterate we'll see, we already saw in poem 360, but we'll see it again in 422 and in poem 676. It'll be fascinating, 676, when we get there. She then will talk about the surgeon. Interestingly, surgeon was used already in 108 and 177 and 366. She'll use it one more time in 1633. Notice the job of the surgeon is to do the job of surgery. The surgeon does not blanch at pain. His habit is severe. Now, who is the surgeon? Maybe it is Thomas Higginson, as we commented from letter 261. But tell him that it ceased to feel. In other words, the one who was being operated on, the creature, is this Emily? Is this her poems that she's talking about? Lying there, and he will tell you, skill is late. In other words, it's too late for me to do what I can to help you. A mightier than he, is this Sam Boyles that we're referencing, has ministered before him. There's no vitality. Are we saying it's too late, that it's impossible? When we get to poem 599, we will play this game. There is a pain so utter, it swallows substance up, then covers the abyss with trance. So memory can step around across upon it as one within a swoon, go safely where an open eye would drop him bone by bone. I think that the argument here is that it's hard to live beyond suffering, especially when the suffering is caused by some critical analysis of a creative act that the artist finds so close to the bone. At 2b, the language of pain here is remarkable, from languor to pain to suffered to drowsiness to dimness and the like. I cannot help at 3a but go back to our study of T.S. Eliot's four quartets. I think I said to you guys that I think there's a lot of Emily standing behind four quartets. And you'll remember at East Coker 4 that Eliot, he called these lines the heart of four quartets, those really important set of lines. The wounded surgeon plies the steel that questions the distempered part. Beneath the bleeding hands we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art, resolving the enigma of the fever chart. Our only health is the disease, if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please, but to remind of our and Adam's curse, and that to be restored our sickness must grow worse. The whole earth is our hospital, endowed by the ruined millionaire, wherein if we do well we shall die of the absolute paternal care that will not leave us, but prevents us everywhere. The chill ascends from feet to knees, the fever sings in mental wires. If to be warmed, then I must freeze and quake in frigid purgatorial fires, of which the flame is roses and the smoke is briars. The dripping blood our only drink, the bloody flesh our only food, in spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood. Again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. Is this poem standing behind those set of lines? It's very possible, I think. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you were criticized for something that you were trying to create and it left you a certain strange languor, dimness, feeling of distrust even? Thank you.